Hey, what's up? This is Mark at Alchemist.camp, where we learn Elixir and Phoenix by building things. Today we're going to continue the Phoenix 1.4 chat server series. Today will be lesson 4 in it. And what we finished last time was basic sessions. So we made a login page so that a user could log in, and there was authentication for it, password hashing, all those things. And I added one more line to the layout just so we can see which user is logged in and have visible evidence of a session. I'm going to delete that though now, because today we'll be making an auth module. So looking at our router, you can see we have a number of different plugs. We're going to add one more, and it will check to see if any user is logged in. And if there is a user logged in, store some information about that user in the connection before passing it off to each controller. So this plug we'll just call the name of our app, which is chitchat.auth, and we don't need any options for it. I'll save it, which will cause some errors because it doesn't exist yet. And there are a couple of places that make sense to put this kind of module. We could put it in our controllers because all of our controllers will use it. However, in my experience building Phoenix apps, I end up making quite a few different plugs, some for handling event analytics or things like that. So I'm going to actually make a whole new directory, and we'll call this plugs. And then inside of plugs, we'll just call it auth.ex. We called it chitchat.auth in the router, so that's what we have to call it here. Since it's a plug, we're going to import plug.con. Then in order to be a valid plug, we need two more things. We need a call function, which gets run every single time the plug is used. Then we need an init function. The init function is where you put the more expensive work that you want done at compile time, but not every single time the plug is called. And since we don't have anything like that, we're just going to make it a one-liner. So init, and options, and we'll just return those exact same options as is. Then the call function normally takes a con and options, but we're not going to use the options. So we'll just do it like so. If we did have a more complex init function, we could transform these options so that every single time we use the plug in the call, these options would actually be whatever these options had been transformed into on the way through that function. The call function in a plug takes a plug.con struct as input, and it also returns one. So that's why we can put a lot of them together in a pipeline. So we're just changing the con at each function we pass it through. So we'll start by getting our user ID out of the session. So get session is something that's in plug.con, and we can use this because we imported plug.con, con and user ID. Then we'll get the appropriate user out of the database. So user equals user ID end. So if there was no user ID, this will just be false. User equals user ID end chitchat.accounts.get user. This is just the default made by the generators. User ID, let's make this a wider screen so you can see everything here. And then finally, we'll put the user we just got out of the database, or a false if there wasn't one, into the assigns. So assign con current user that we just found. And now we have access to whichever user is logged in, or a false if nobody is, in the assigns on any single page request anywhere in the app. So let's restart the server since we changed something in the router. Gotta do that. And reload this page. Now let's look in the layout. Before we had this con.assigns user ID as so, and we can still do that of course, but we've also got current user automatically put into the assigns. And of course that's not HTML safe because that's just the entire user. But you can see here's the meta information. We have the email address. We have when it was inserted, password hash, all of that. So we could just say current user.id to do the same thing we were getting before. And we could also do current user.name, like so, or whatever information we want from the user. Okay, so that's fairly useful. Now that we have current user available everywhere, we can actually extend this auth plug so that we get some more useful functionality out of it. Like, let's make a plug that will restrict access to a page based on whether someone's logged in or not. And the way we'll do that is with a function plug. We'll call it logged in user, and we'll use it to require that someone's logged in. We'll do two separate function heads for this. First is if they are logged in, and the way we'll know they are logged in is the con that's passed in will have an assigns for that current user that we set above. So current user, and that is going to have some kind of struct in it, although it's actually going to be a user struct. We could specify that exactly if we wanted to. And we don't care about the ops, and what we do is just return the exact same con. So what's the effect of calling this function on a con if there is someone logged in? It's absolutely no effect at all. It just passes the con along and does nothing. However, if they're not logged in, then we don't want to continue. We don't want to show them the page. We'll just halt everything. So logged in user. If it didn't match the function head above, then they must not be logged in, because if they were logged in, there would be a current user in the assigns. So start with a con, and first thing we'll do is we'll put a flash saying there's an error. Error, you must be logged in to access that page. Then we'll redirect them to the index page for now. Redirect to helpers dot page path con and index, and we'll have to alias those helpers in order to use them. Phoenix 1.4, it's not in there automatically for you anymore. So alias chitchat web.router.helpers. And what did we miss here? Put flash. Why can't we put flash? Because it has to be controller. So we'll also import phoenix.controller. And that's why I earlier said that I often put this in the controllers folder. However, if you do use a lot of plugs in a project, I like to have them in their own folder just to keep things separated a bit. Finally, after we redirect, we need to halt, because if you don't halt, then the con will get rendered twice and there'll be a problem. All right, now one reasonable place to use this logged in user is actually the user's route. So I'm logged in right now and I can see the show page, but a lot of apps you wouldn't want someone to be able to see that if they're not logged in. So we'll go to the user controller and we'll import just that one function from our auth module. So that will be only logged in user, 2 arguments. And to use it, we'll just type plug and then give the name as an atom. Logged in user when action not in new or create. So once this is updated, we'll no longer be able to see the index if we're not logged in. Can't import it. We'll stop the server and restart it. So we can see that, but we're logged in right now. Let's log out. Yes, that code was not safe. It should be current user and current user.name, because we didn't have a current, we had a false current user, so there was no name on it. Okay, nobody's there. Okay, now we'll go back to users, and you must be logged in to access that page. Log back in, and we should be able to go to users. All right, that was fairly straightforward. We just needed 2 lines of code, and we restricted every single action except for new and create to users that are logged in. But just because someone's logged in doesn't mean they should be able to delete other users' accounts, for example. So let's add a little bit more complexity to the auth module. We've got one function here for a logged in user. We'll make another function plug for admin users. And let's actually break up this functionality a little bit. I'm going to make a helper function. So this assign con current user, we're going to do a little bit more than that when when we're putting the information into the assigns. So we'll just call a function put current user con and user, and then we'll define that function down here. Put current user, and it'll take con and user. Then we'll start with a con and do exactly what we just were. We'll assign the current user to it. Then we'll also assign admin user, which will just be a Boolean saying whether or not the user is an admin. Now in a real app, you'll have some sort of logic for figuring that out. Maybe you'll have a row in your database for it. In this app, it's just going to be whether or not that user is me. So admin user is going to be if there's a user and that user has a credential and that user's credential email is my email. So you can see we put the current user into the assigns, and it'll be the whole user struct we put in there. Then we'll also add an assigns for admin user, and this is just a Boolean. It's going to be if that user exists and they have a credential and an email that is equal to my email, then they are an admin, and that admin flag will be true. So that is all we'll do for here, and that will get called every single time call does. Then we'll make the function plug itself. So same kind of deal, admin user and con if we have assigns of admin user true, then we just continue on as we were. And otherwise, it's going to be a lot like what we have here in the current user logged in when it fails. So I'll just copy that down. So admin user, you must be an admin, and you know what? We may not always want to show that information, just that that page even exists. So let's see. We'll make the default behavior this. You do not have access to that page. However, we're also going to check the options this time, so we'll use them. We'll check the ops, and if there's something in it called poker face that's set to true, then we won't reveal that the page exists. So we'll put status 404. This function is also included in con that we imported. and then we'll render the error view 404 message page not found. And as in the other case, we'll halt. Right, let's try this in our user controller. So we'll have to import that admin user plug as well. Admin user 2. And then we should be able to use it the same way as this one. So admin user poker face true when action in index or delete. Error view.render is undefined. Error view is not available. That's because I forgot to alias it. So alias chitchatweb.error view. Okay, ID foo, and this, we don't really need this line in here anymore. So we found nothing, not found. And we log in as the admin. Now we should still be able to see all the users. Okay, so we have restrictions based on being an admin, restrictions based on being logged in. The other one that makes a lot of sense is there's certain things you should be allowed to do to your own page, but not to other pages. So looking at other people's pages is a good example. If I were to log out as user number 2, if I were to log in as user number 2, or just be logged out in general, I shouldn't really be able to see that page. So log out, and that's not visible, but if we log in, we can see our own page, which is reasonable, but we shouldn't be able to see other people's pages. So let's make one more plug for that. Now these two function plugs, logged in user and admin user, are pretty general across the app. It doesn't really matter if we're just talking about user pages or chat rooms or just about any other kind of page. There's a good chance that what you show is going to be different if someone is logged in or if they aren't. And there are going to be many pages where it matters if someone is an admin or not. So what we're going to do is we'll make another plug inside the user controller itself for this behavior of only showing their own information for certain actions. So we'll call this plug correct user. Correct user. And we'll do that when they're editing their page. Update goes along with edit, or when they're deleting. And actually we'll allow users to see other users. They just can't edit them. Let's fix that spelling there. And then we need to create the function itself. Before we do that, let's look at what the other actions are getting. So with show, for example, we've got con, and then we're getting the ID out of these parameters here. Same thing with update, we're getting an ID, we're getting a user. So what we're going to do is in the con, there will be assigns that we got from the auth module down here. And then the second parameter will get an ID, and we'll see if that ID matches the user ID or not. So we'll call this, we'll make a private function, and we'll call this correct user. And it's going to take assigns. Let's see, assigns will come in, and we need to get the current user and the admin both off of that assigns. So current user, and we'll save that as current, and admin user we'll capture as admin. And this is a bit of a long function head, but it can't really be avoided. So we've got the assigns, and then we'll also get the params. ID, and that's coming in as a string, which is why I have to match it this way. And all of that is the con, and then we'll throw out the params. And I just realized this is a little bit confusing. So I just mentioned params twice. These params, this ID that we're capturing, that's a param because when you get a user from this user's resources, there will be a user and then some user ID. So we're getting the params from there, and this params is just the second. It's just the second parameter to the function. So it's a little bit confusing. Then if string .to integer of the ID is current .id, so notice current is what we just pulled out of the assigns, or if admin is true, then we'll just do the con, just pass it along as it was. Otherwise, we'll do the usual put flash error. You don't have access to that page. And redirect to user path, con, show, and current. It'll just take you to your own page, and then we'll halt everything. And I forgot routes again. This has changed since Phoenix 1.3. Okay, looks like everything is working. Let's stop the server, start it again, and have a look-see. Okay, so we'll log in as user number 2. And then we'll go to our own page. That's fine. We'll go to someone else's page, and it let us. Oh, because we're allowing it for showing. Okay, that's fine. So we can see ourselves, we can see someone else. Can we edit our own page? Yes, we can. Can we edit someone else's page? You don't have access. Excellent. All right, that's a fairly good amount of functionality, especially for not having pulled in any third-party dependencies. We can now filter every single action based on whether someone's logged in or not, whether if it's their own page or not, whether if they're an admin or not. And we did have to add this to our controller, and this is actually something that we'd probably end up reduplicating across most controllers. So I'm going to move this out of the user controller and put this in our chit-chat web file. Definitely want to be careful about adding too much to this file, but in the case of importing only a single function, it's not a problem. So we'll do that right here. Import chit-chat auth, only logged in user and admin user for the controllers. So each controller will have access to these two functions. It's a pretty minimal overhead, and they generally are going to want that functionality. Save this, and so now if we wanted to use these, well, correct user is limited to user, but if we wanted to use logged in user or admin user in any of the other controllers, such as the room controller, we can do that. In fact, right now for a room controller, we could say that only an admin could delete the room. And all it would take to do that would just be one line here, plug admin user when action in delete. And admin users are the only ones that can delete rooms now. So go to rooms. Oh, and let's restart the server as well. And now we should be able to see it, but we should not be able to delete it. Are you sure? Okay. You don't have access to that page. And we still have the room. And we should still be able to edit it, get rid of that typo from last time. Yep. So there we go. That was surprisingly easy. In fact, maybe we shouldn't let random people edit rooms either. And now they can't. That's it for this episode. If you learned something or found it useful, then definitely hit subscribe, click the bell on YouTube, and sign up at Alchemist.camp, where you can get the rest of the series. Till next time, code on.